Welcome to the Blockchain All-Star Series. I'm your host, Layla Gulen. Blockchain and distributed ledger technology are at the forefront of the Internet 3.0 era, where the technology can enable trusted and transparent sharing of data and digital assets. And though the technology is still at its early stage, who makes up the constellation of innovators guiding us through the digital revolution powered by blockchain? Well, we'd like to welcome Drummond Reed. Drummond has spent more than 2 decades working on internet identity, security, privacy, and trust frameworks. He joined Evernym as Chief Trust Officer after Evernym's acquisition of Respect Network, where he was CEO, co-founder, and co-author of the Respect Trust Framework, which was honored with the Privacy Award at the 2011 European Identity Conference. And in 2002, he was also a recipient of the Digital Identity Pioneer Award from Digital ID World. And in 2013, yet another honor as an OASIS Distinguished Contributor. Drummond, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Happy to join you. Thanks.
That's an awful lot of accolades.
Well, I have been doing this for a rather long time.
Well, it's a great place to start, because I would love to know, where did it all start for you?
Oh, it is a very long story. I did not start out in computer science. I actually started out in writing, and slowly got more and more. I was using computers as a tool to write. The more I got into that, the more I started teaching other people. And then I started getting into, well, how do you actually make computers do what people want them to do instead of just what they're, what the machines are good at. So
and what you're talking about is writing code as far as writing is concerned?
No, I started out writing words, as in writing. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. What did you write about?
I was a screenwriter. Yeah.
Very creative. Very creative medium.
I love movies and film, and so I was headed in that direction. But writing screenplays is actually very intensive with the formatting, and it's a lot of work to get things. And so I wanted a good tool for doing that, and that's how I got deeply into word processing early on.
That's so fascinating. So to go from screenwriting to doing what you're doing today, so at some point, you discovered that after teaching other people how to use a computer and to do it, as you say, what you want it to do, what would you say was the pivotal moment where you said, this is really the path that I want to take? These are the avenues that I want to pursue.
Well, it was the growth of the PC. As I said, I've been doing this for a long time. And when PCs started to take off in the mid 80s, and we started to realize that power is a tool. Because I've been using them and really thinking about them as a tool, I went, oh my gosh, we're at the very tip of this. And there's so much more to be harvested here. And even though I always wanted to get back to writing, I just got deeper and deeper into computers, and then architecture and protocols, and all the way down to this very deep topic of digital identity.
Yeah. And while you were at Harvard, that's where you studied not only film, but also psychology and English?
Yeah, I was not, personal computers hadn't happened yet, and I wasn't studying computer science. So I didn't do anything related to computers when I was at Harvard.
And I was going to ask you, so when you were studying there, did you make friends with people who were in computer science, but you say that it really never existed quite yet?
Nope. As I said, I was studying writing and psychology and film, and was just looking at computers as a writing tool. And the very first exposure I had was, folks go back that far, was to something called the electric pencil, which was developed actually, I think, there in Cambridge. And I wanted that tool so bad, but I couldn't afford it at that time. So I literally dropped out and went to work back in Alaska, where my family had moved, so I could afford to buy a computer to start writing.
That's amazing. I want to eventually ask you if there's any correlation between film writing and blockchain specifically. But let's fast forward to the blockchain era. So when you first started to hear this term blockchain, because, and I've talked about this with other guests on the series, it's still not a part of the vernacular of most people. So when you first heard of blockchain, what went through your mind and what were your discoveries? What made it so interesting to you?
Well, you have to understand at that point, I really got involved with blockchain in about 2015, and it had already been fairly well established, and start to meet the popular press through things, like Bitcoin. Ethereum was, rising up at that point. But the very particular perspective that I had and a group of us had in the digital identity community was to look over and say, oh, there's a fascinating new tool for digital trust infrastructure. We were not at all interested in cryptocurrency, which was one of the main things driving interest in blockchain. We were interested in how it used cryptography and public and private keys to secure that, and said, oh, we could use that tool for what we now call decentralizing digital identity. And that has turned into it's a revolution in the digital identity and trust industry. So that's what blockchain really sort of unleashed and opened up for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to talk a bit more about blockchain and its future and where you think it's headed. But let's go back to Evernym. So tell us a bit more about this company.
So Evernym is focused. We're the leading company in this new branch of digital identity known as self-sovereign identity, or SSI. And it really is decentralized digital identity based on digital credentials, formerly known as verifiable credentials, cryptographically verifiable. That if I get a credential in my wallet, my digital wallet, just like having a real one, then I can share it digitally, like with a website or with another person, phone to phone directly, or in any kind of a situation where I need to prove something about myself, and I can do it digitally. So I can go way beyond where we are today with usernames and passwords, and prove all kinds of things that I need to prove, and I can do it in a more secure and a more privacy respecting way. So it's just, as I said, it's a revolution in digital identity, and that's just changed the industry. So Evernym was the company that innovated how the technology you need on top of blockchain to support verifiable credentials. And we've just grown a business around that, offering SSI as a service to enterprises and then indirectly to individuals.
And why is it so important, and how does one apply it to everyday life?
I'll give you a wonderful example. One of our largest customers is IATA, the International Air Transport Association. There's this thing you may have heard of called COVID.
I may have heard that term once or twice lately.
Yeah, it's sort of a problem when it comes to travel, especially international air travel. So what came about, and we were focused in other areas, and then COVID hit, and suddenly it was like, how are you going to prove your COVID health status, that you've been immunized or you've had a record in a strongly verifiable way, without having to put all your information, your personal health information, in a centralized database, without having to share what you don't really have to. Just prove what an airline, for instance, needs to know, that you've had a test or you've had a vaccination, and therefore you can board a plane and you'll be able to cross a border at the other side. So it produced a real demand for verifiable credentials for international travel, and Evernym supplies the verifiable credential software for IATA. It's now being used by about a dozen airlines, and it's just growing all the time. So it's one really good example where digital credentials can actually help travelers. The lines at Heathrow, for example, were 4 hours plus with all the paperwork associated with that, and we want to cut that back down to where it's just like a mobile boarding pass.
Right.
So there's many other examples. They're starting to be used in healthcare and financial services. How many times do you call a bank or a credit union and have to go through 20 questions to prove who you are, right?
Oh, that is true. That is true.
Yeah. With credit
And
unions,
because I'm
well,
sorry to interrupt you, but because you mentioned healthcare, when we're talking healthcare and cybersecurity, would this concept be applicable to various healthcare systems so that should they suffer a breach or a hack or something, that information, that patient information is kept private, is kept safe? Is that also applicable in that way? And why are we not seeing more industries and more companies, organizations using this?
it's the technology, just like blockchain, is still fairly new, but the breakthrough potential to protect personal data is being widely recognized. It is moving into healthcare. There's a company called Lumetic. It's a division of a U.S. healthcare organization that is starting to standardize digital credentials, verifiable credentials for patient data, and starting to turn around if you got a thing like a vaccination test or any vaccination, but also doctor's reports. And as you start to be able to have those as digital credentials on a device or set of devices you control, now you've got really portable healthcare data that's just stored on your device. Yes, the doctor or hospital that originated that data, they still have a copy, but unless you provided permission, and that's cryptographically digitally signed permission to use that data, the data by itself will start to be lower and lower value and even become toxic if it's not actually permissioned. So therefore, you can take the big data breaches that have happened out there, and it's going to take us a while, but in a few years, suddenly you won't be able to hijack someone's identity by just stealing some data out on the web. You will not get their private keys. You won't be able to get their permission. And in fact, if you have their data and you don't have their permission, you're going to be in trouble.
So you're putting cyber criminals out of work.
Yeah, but don't tell them yet that.
No, that's just between us. That's just between us. Well, and that's building trust as well, between you and the organization that you're doing business with, that you're transacting with, and so forth. Speaking of the word trust, your very title is Chief Trust Officer. So maybe you can explain that just a little bit.
Sure. What we're building now is decentralized digital trust infrastructure. You could say all of blockchain fits inside this larger umbrella of decentralized digital trust infrastructure. And it's well-known titles in the industry. You're a chief security officer, you're a chief privacy officer. Then a couple of years ago, we started seeing chief identity officers for digital identity infrastructure. But when you're doing digital trust infrastructure, it's all of those together. You need to have strong identity with strong security and strong privacy, and you roll those together. That's trust. And so we just rolled those. It's starting to become a title. You'll see, I think, more of that out there in the industry, especially as we build this infrastructure. And so companies and associations, organizations, even governments are going to start having people that say, are we properly implementing digital trust infrastructure?
Oh, so you're kind of at the forefront of the whole Chief Trust Officer name title, I would say. But when you first started Respect, talking about starting things fresh, the world's first global private cloud network, Respect Network. So maybe guide us a little bit through its nascence and where it is today.
Sure. In the 2008-9 era, I actually was executive director of two industry organizations, the Information Card Foundation, which Microsoft helped start, and really was the earliest form of digital credentials. And then the U.S. government, after the Obama administration came in, wanted to say, hey, we want to start accepting digital credentials, digital logins from U.S. citizens, but we need more of what they call a trust framework around it. We need to know that the providers of those credentials, be it a bank or Google or an insurance company, is operating in a trusted way. And so we started something called Open Identity Exchange, another association. So I was then executive director of OIX, and finally I said, wait a minute, the opportunity is finally getting here to start to roll out new infrastructure, new kinds of networks for this that could really empower people with their personal data. And that's when I started Respect Network. I think it was in 2011. And again, 2011, 2015, we were sort of building up, and we had quite a bit of investment and a lot of partner companies interested. And then along came blockchain, and we said, what we've been calling personal clouds are now turning into these wallets and agents that are able to create cryptographic connections and exchange digitally signed credentials to have real, solid, but decentralized digital trust. So that's how it all evolved. My Evernym acquired Respect Network in 2016. So that's why I've been here since.
Oh, very interesting. Being someone who's so embedded in the tech industry, for a lot of lay people, when they see the changes in technology over, say, the last 20 years, your mind is kind of blown because you see where, say, mobile phones started, where they were in 2020, where they are here we are almost 2022. Do you also marvel at the speed in which technology has advanced, or do you see it more as a slow progression, slow to adopt new things, new ways of doing things?
No, I mean, my entire career, it's been accelerating faster and faster. The internet is sped it up. Blockchain is speeding it up. When we started work on this book on self-sovereign identity almost 3 years ago, we thought we'd be done in about a little over a year, and then COVID hit, so it dragged it out. By the time the first half of the book was done, and then we had to wait through COVID, we pretty much had to rewrite the first half of the book.
Wow.
So it's changing very quickly, and it's going to continue. I don't think we're going to see any slowdown in the pace of innovation.
Tell me more about the book.
So it was a project started by another a friend of mine at Evernym who had written a book on Bitcoin. He's based in Madrid. Alex Prushat is his name, and that book became very popular, one of the most popular Bitcoin books in Europe. And he enlisted a bunch of Bitcoin experts to contribute to the book. And he said, let's do the same thing for SSI. He'd started something called SSI Meetup, which I think has like 55 webinars recorded on it. It's ssimeetup.org. So he said, let's turn it into a book. And he convinced me to contribute a couple chapters and be a co-author with him to invite a number of others. So we said, okay, well, as long as it won't take too long. And we sent out the word, and we had about 20 people say, okay, I'll contribute. And we were about 2/3 of the way there, and then COVID hit. Yeah. And we backed away. We thought the whole project, for a couple months, we thought, are we just going to stop? And then we saw the demand coming, and we said, no, well, let's keep going. Mm-hmm. But as I said, we had to expand the book. We actually ended up with 54 contributing authors.
Oh my goodness.
When it was finally finished out in print in June. So there's a huge amount of information in there. And anyone who's interested in these topics of self-sovereign identity, decentralized digital trust, I recommend it.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you say that this is a starter book for people who are just trying to get a handle on cryptocurrency and blockchain technology, or is this something for the more seasoned pro to be able to digest?
No, it is a starter book. The whole outset is written to orient you, but it's not going to teach you. It will teach you about the basics of blockchain, but not about cryptocurrency or the other uses. It's just about this area called self-sovereign identity, which is all about how that technology and digital wallets and digital agents and digital credentials work. So it's specifically about that area. If your audience members are interested in that aspect of blockchain, I highly recommend it. As an example, so At Hyperledger, the open source projects at the Linux Foundation, I think there are 20 projects inside Hyperledger. Only 2 of them really deal with digital identity and SSI. The others are all dealing with, enterprise blockchain uses, supply chain, some, cryptocurrency related or decentralized finance, DeFi. That's the majority of what's there. There's just one segment that's on digital identity, but it's growing, and that's what the book is about.
Oh, very interesting. I will definitely have to pick it up, but you'll have to be patient with me. I might be contacting you with lots and lots of questions. For a layperson such as myself, all of this information is incredible. It's amazing to think that we're going in the way of the digital wallet, and it's also comforting to know that our personal information, which has become so vulnerable, actually has the potential of being protected. I mean, nowadays we have to put everything out there all the time, and you say that this technology is just moving at the speed of light. So I'm curious what you think, where you think blockchain is going to be in, say, the next 5 years.
Well, because blockchain is so broad and uses of blockchain like cryptocurrency are having such a great impact, I'm not really qualified to talk about those areas. I just know that they're driving interest in blockchain and decentralized finance in a major way. What I can say is the segment where I work on SSI and digital credentials and decentralized digital trust infrastructure, it is going to be a revolution. And I have given several webinars that really strongly stress. A lot of people think the privacy genie is out of the bottle, right? We'll never get it back in. I don't agree. I think that we have a chance to reclaim privacy on the internet in a major way. And there are some governments that really want to see that happen and are assisting us, especially in Europe with GDPR. And for instance, in June, the European Commission announced they're going to establish a European digital identity wallet initiative for all the citizens of the EU. And all the governments in the EU, all the member nations are going to start issuing digital credentials into your digital wallet. And they are going to require the big tech companies to accept them. So we are going to see a real revolution in how we can start to reclaim our privacy and have greater security as individuals and just more trusted relationships on the internet of all kinds.
Now, you say that that's happening in Europe. How long do you think that's going to take for it to jump the pond and to really take hold here in this country?
Well, right alongside what's happening in Europe is Canada. I would actually say Canada led the way, in particular the province of BC, which is very close to me here in Seattle, but happens to be one of the world leaders in this. They've actually invested, been the largest investor, along with Evernym, in open source at the Hyperledger project and the Hyperledger Aries. And they're building up what the BC Digital Trust Service is building up, all these capabilities for citizens of British Columbia. They've been followed by the province of Ontario, is also announced its digital wallet, digital credential initiative. They want to have those wallets and credentials in the hands of Ontario citizens by the end of March. So the EU Digital Identity Wallet Initiative is supposed to be by next September, a little under a year from now. Ontario is going to be there in half that time. BC Gov has already rolled out some of their services for this. So this is happening quickly. I mean, this blockchain thing, it doesn't seem like you can slow it down.
It certainly doesn't sound like it at all. Now, through the whole process, and I think mentors and people, they can come into our lives at any point in our careers. Was there ever anybody for you that was a source of inspiration, a source of guidance that has led you into this world?
Oh, constantly. Not having any background or having even gone to school in computer science, I have learned, nor in business. I don't have a business degree. As I said, I dropped out after 1 year of college. Every every entrepreneur that I've worked with, every CTO that I've worked with, every CEO I've worked with, I've just learned. It's like I'm constantly in graduate school, and there's just a litany of them. I wouldn't say any one of them because all of them together. I just find if you really listen hard to smart people, you just can't help but learn.
That is absolutely true. And as long as those smart people are willing to give their time to impart their wisdom and their knowledge to others, have you ever come across anybody who's been stingy with their knowledge?
Very first signal to not listen to them.
Right, that is true. That's a good point. That's a very good point. All right. Well, I want to get into something a little bit fun. So I hope you can bear with me and enjoy the process along with me. But want to get to know you, Drummond, as a person, as a human, like the rest of us, not this extremely smart and advanced thinking person. But of course, with your background in film, I would love to know, what was your favorite movie? What movies inspired you to become a screenwriter in the first place?
Oh my God, we could spend the entire hour talking about that.
Do indulge me.
I actually, so I do have a blog called =Drummond.name, where up until the last few years when I've become so busy, I do, for about 5 years, I would put a blog post up when I saw a movie I really loved. But I realized I missed, many years since, and then I got too busy to keep doing it. So probably one of my all-time favorite films is It's a Wonderful Life. We're coming up on the holiday season, and I know I have friends that watch it every year. I don't try and watch it every year, but every couple years. And I must say, watching that for the first time with my wife and I watched it probably 5 times together, but watching it the first time with my 2 boys was just a fantastic, it's just one of the most, classic movies, but also just wonderfully scripted, acted, and made.
Most definitely. Most definitely. How old are your boys now?
26 and 29. So.
Oh, goodness. Okay. You look too young. The technology is keeping you young, obviously.
Amazing what Zoom can do with effects.
Right. Yeah. And what would you say has been your greatest accomplishment, and what do you think has been your biggest challenge? I don't want to categorize it as a failure, because I think our failures can help us learn and do great things. But what would you say is your biggest challenge? What do you think is your biggest accomplishment?
Well, accomplishments, I think, is what we are getting done now with the infrastructure and the standards. Verifiable credentials as a W3C standard was passed 2 years ago. I wasn't that involved in that, but the underlying standard for all of this digital trust infrastructure, and there's a whole chapter about it in the book, is called decentralized identifiers, or DIDs. And I started work. I led the first team on that specification under a contract with U.S. Department of Homeland Security 7 years ago, and we just reached the point where it's been in its final vote at the W3C. So when we finally get that done, hit a little friction because everyone voted for it except for Apple and Google and Mozilla. They had some objections that we're trying to work through. But anyway, when we get that, when we started the Trust over IP Foundation to really standardize all of the decentralized digital trust infrastructure. About 18 months ago, and that's going great guns. So I'm really happy about that. The greatest challenge? Oh, let me tell you about the standards I've worked on before that. I worked on one at Oasis, for which they said, "Oh, you can be a distinguished contributor." 2 of them, they're called XRI and XDI. 15 years without getting any real traction. It was just too advanced, too far down the road. So you learn some very hard lessons that way. And of course, I've started several companies that have not paid off for the investors. I'm certainly hoping the one I'm working on now is going to do that. But as an entrepreneur, you earn some very, very hard lessons.
That must be incredibly frustrating when you can really have the vision, but it's very difficult to get other people on board. Do you think that is kind of a constant challenge that you're met with? And the reason why I ask that is because just take, kids these days and how they grow up having technology that we never had, that we learned to use as we got older. But then by the time they become our age, they're going to be expecting so much more. So is it a constant challenge, or is it getting a little bit easier with
No,
people's
I'd say
mindset the
it's
way
a
it is
constant
today?
challenge. It will continue to be a constant challenge.
Yeah.
I Entrepreneurs learn that there is, it's like as rare as a lightning strike that an entrepreneur just goes in and it just takes off and they just ride the rails of the moon. I do, I must say when the ICO craze happened, I had enough experience to just go, you know, bad stuff's going to come out of that. And sure enough, a lot of bad stuff came out of it. There were just way too many, get rich quick, or I just, I just do a couple things and it all takes off. And, it came home to roost. Luckily, it's now we're getting to the real infrastructure. But if you're not challenged as an entrepreneur, then I would say your chances of success are very small. The greater the challenge you're actually overcoming, the greater your reward.
Absolutely, 100%. I'm going to take you all over the map with a couple of these questions. So, curious if you have any hidden talents or abilities or hobbies that you like to engage in.
Well, as I said, I am a screenwriter, and I
Yes.
still want to get back to that. I also I have no musical background at all, and I've been writing songs for years. So just love to
A
do that.
songwriter, instrumental or
No,
lyrical?
no, just lyrics and music and melodies. And every so often, I turn there's an occasion like a wedding or something, and it'll actually turn into something. It's just a lot of fun, but I have no background in it, just like I had no background in computers.
But you seem to have succeeded at that, so you're doing something right, Drummond. Where in the world have you never been that you would love to visit?
But I've never been. Ooh. Um,
Well, it sounds like you've been to a lot of places, but by the way
yeah,
you
there's
answered that first part.
been a lot of travel involved with this. Well, I've never
Yeah.
been to Jakarta or Bali, and I have a childhood friend that lives there that we keep talking about it. But I really want to visit that part of the world. I've never been to Africa. That is another place I really want to go. Yeah, I have been to Iceland, but only into Reykjavik, and I really want to see the rest of Iceland too.
Is that your favorite place to travel to, or do you have a
No,
favorite?
no, no. It's just I have many favorite places to travel to, but I just you fly through there coming to and from Europe, and I want to see the rest of it. The wonderful Iceland videos when you're flying Icelandic Air or other Icelandic airlines, they show them to you, and you just go, "I got to do that."
Let me ask you, did you try the fermented shark?
I don't think I've had that dish, but I tell you, I've had some amazing fish. I mean, I come from Seattle, so we have fantastic seafood. But one of the best seafood meals I've ever had in my life was in Helsinki, and trying fish dishes that I just, my oldest son and I went to a conference in Helsinki, and he came over before his final year of law school, and we had one of the most fantastic meals, and it was just a lot of fish dishes that we'd never tried before. It was
Oh
amazing.
wow. Well, those sound nice. I will say the fermented shark I hear is a delicacy that requires an acquired taste. So you have to be pretty brave, I think, if you want to try it. All right, if you had a time machine, would you go to the past or the future?
I would go to ancient Greece. I
Really,
just
and
would
why?
go completely fast. I don't speak Greek, so we'd have to do something about that. But I just would be really, really fascinated. I always loved it in school, and a lot of the origins of Western civilization started there. And I'd love to be able to talk to some of the folks there and see how things like the Senate and the dialectic really worked.
Yeah, yeah. Foundation for civilization as we know it. It's truly fascinating. In Greek mythology, of course, applicable today as it ever was, right?
Definitely. Where do you think the
Yeah,
Marvel
yeah.
from.
That's true. That's very true.
Of course, that's Norse gods as well, though. That's yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that is. You're right. You're right. So you did mention that you would eventually like to go back to screenwriting. So is there anything that you've conjured up? Anything that you're kind of flirting with? Maybe writing down some notes that you want to pursue?
I have at least a dozen screenplays. I'll never live long enough to write them all.
No. Anything that you think you want to just really flesh out and maybe produce?
I mean, there are several that, again, I wrote several and actually rewrote them several times. That's what real writing is about. And I just love to get back into that.
And what's the genre? Is it drama? Is it comedy or sci-fi?
There's several. There is sci-fi, but there's also fantasy things, along sort of Star Wars direction, those kinds of things. But also just straight dramas. Did you ever see My Dinner with Andre?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, there's a film similar to that would be one of my favorites. And be very low budget, but it would be fun.
Some of those are the best to watch because it's pure acting, it's pure writing. Yes. I would say it's like a David Mamet, Glenn Ross or something, where it's you really feel the ire of the character, and it is truly more about human emotion than it is all the jazz that's happening around you.
Exactly. My other favorite, I think Hitchcock was amazing. He was just. I think you have to study him to really appreciate just how clever and well wrought some of his movies were. And I have one in that vein that I'd still like to see made.
Well, we would all like to see it made. And any final thoughts before we wrap things up? Just anything that you want viewers to know, to think about as we head into the new year. As we look to just this burgeoning technology?
Well, here's the pandemic has really been an enormous challenge for the whole planet. And a lot of folks, have rued the fact that, and lamented that it's brought so much of our activities online and virtual. As someone who's worked from home for over 20 years now, that wasn't really that much of a shift. And so I like to share with folks that, connections like this, we've never met in person, but there's a lot. It's not as rich as being, together in person, but the reach is enormous. And you really get into a digital relationship, what you put into it and what you encourage the others. So I think there's a lot more to that, and that we are just scratching the surface of what we can do with digital technology to enhance our real lives. And of course, what I'm all about is how do we get over a lot of the digital dangers and the dark forces that are preventing us from doing that. And I think, if we can tap that, if we can put in place this decentralized digital trust infrastructure, we can a lot more effectively as a species attend to, some of our really, really pressing problems, right? Climate change and, systemic racism, other things. We can find new ways, as a species. This is a new way to communicate and connect that if we take full advantage of and don't move to all digital, but enhance it properly, we can make it a wonderful life.
I think that is a perfect note to end on. And if it can't be in person, I am so happy that we had this chat virtually. Drummond Reed, I want to thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much. It was really, really a pleasure. And I wish I could do more webinars like this one.
It was a delight, and we will look forward to another one, hopefully soon. In the meantime, have a wonderful holiday.
And you too, and all the viewers.
Thank you very much. Well, that's going to do it for us on this latest edition of Blockchain All Stars. We'll see you again next time.